Some animes are like family reunions. You have the cousins that are absolute peak that everybody talks about, and then sometimes you have the poor black sheep cousin that nobody wants to talk about. Well, the one series that rings the most in my ear is when people start talking about the Fate series, specifically Fate Stay Night. Now, it's a bit of a flex in my opinion that Fate has so many entries and people says it only has one quote-unquote bad season. Well, we can also throw in the lesbian lollies. While over here, we've got One Punch Man crapping the bed after 2 seasons, and The Promised Neverland doing the same after only 1. So now the question, is Fate Stay Night really that bad? Now, to be fair in this review, we have to understand the landscape that the series was in when it came out, rather than where it is now. Because when most people talk about Fate, they mention the grand fights, the timeless animation, complex characters, and overall amazing story. But Stay Night is never in that conversation. The Fate series began back in late January of 2002, created by Type Moon, releasing not as a manga nor as an anime, but as a visual novel. Now, this is not unheard of because other series such as Clannad in 04, Steins Gate in 09 have the same origin, but not many others have the same level of fame, except for this one, which is a bit more infamous. Now, how does a visual novel differ from manga, or even a light novel? And why does it seem to matter? Well, besides the fact that manga usually gets picked up into anime a lot more frequently, and light novels as well, they seem to have one cohesive story that they are trying to tell. But you would expect a visual novel not to be that different. It's kinda mixing the other two together. The images like in manga, and a long story like in light novels. But here's where visual novels differ from these two. The few examples I gave you earlier each have multiple endings. Like Steins Gate has 6 endings, Clannad has debatably 11 endings, and then comes School Days with a massive 21. Now we've seen books like this before with the Choose Your Own Adventure series. And for any kid that was like me that had a very short attention span, you dreaded these books because when you got a bad ending, time after time after time again, and then you go right back to the beginning, you kinda just didn't care anymore, you just threw the whole thing out. So a video game was the best option to do so with its save points and such. But don't worry, the Fate novel isn't nearly as divergent as the others, with it only having a manageable 3 endings. With those being the Unlimited Blades Work route, Heaven's Feel route, and the main focus of this video, the Fate route. Okay, so now that we have this background for Fate Stay Night, let's focus our attention on the anime. Fate Stay Night, the anime, was released on January 7th, 2006, under the direction of Studio Dean. Okay, now, even though we literally just started 3 seconds ago, let us take a quick pause here, because this is one of the biggest differences for the series going forward. Because once we get to the next proper season, that's when Ufotable takes over the animation. Now, this isn't completely the equivalent of a Baby Sneeze versus Hydrogen Bomb, because Studio Dean has some pretty damn good animation with its work on Konosuba, which looks amazing. But this isn't one of them, with it looking like the studio's usual work, like this from Rurouni Kenshin, and my personal favorite, Giant Killing. Plus, let's be honest, who the hell is ever gonna top this animation? So, back to the anime. Fate Stay Night focuses primarily on Shiro and Saber's relationship, and that's where I feel it stands apart from the other 2 routes. As yes, there is romance between Rin and Sakura for each of their respective routes, but in Unlimited Blades Work, I feel the focus is more on Shiro and Archer's conflicting ideologies rather than love. And Heaven's Feel is more saving Sakura from the dark side, with the tone reflecting the change, as I feel it's a lot more lighthearted from the gun, with it giving Konosuba vibes, rather than this. The pace for the show is very sporadic, as in the beginning, it feels bloated, with there being flashbacks for something that literally happened 5 minutes ago, and then by the end of the series, it just feels like they went, oh crap, we forgot this. You know what? Fuck it, just put it in the last 3 episodes, we'll deal with it later. Case in point being Gilgamesh and Castor. But remember, this is the first swing at adapting a story that can take up to 30 hours to complete, and fitting it into a 24 episode runtime of 10 hours. And it's very evident the director wanted to keep very close to the visual novel, not just in look, but also in pacing. with an example being the show dragging out Rin and Shiro destroying all these seals. But oh boy, did they decide not to cut one very specific thing. I forgot to tell you just one last detail about the visual novel. It's an eroge. What? Yeah, this is the kind of stuff that you would dread if your parents walked in while playing. And yes, while there is the church scene in Limited Blades Works, and to be honest, a very close second in Heaven's Feel's rainy night scene, but that seems a bit more classy or mature in how it's presented. Whereas in Stay Night, it feels a bit more for comedy. And then the ruin scene is just...
Are you winning, son?
In order for the transplant to take effect, we must establish physical contact between each of us.
But the thing about the eroge is it does push the story forward in the area of character relationships, especially Saber and Shiro, as after their mana transfer, they seem to be awkward around one another, which I find to be cute and funny. Especially Saber, who is usually so stoic and level-headed, and we see her getting flustered. And with the romance budding, you do feel a bit for Shiro when he has to sacrifice him having Saber to himself in order to have her destroy the Holy Grail. Again. But the character who surprised me the most was Ilya. Because in the other routes, she does have an impact, especially Heaven's Field. But I never had an emotional reaction to her character. That is until Stay Night, where you get to see a lot more of her personality, and since I knew what her ending entailed due to the other route, I genuinely was wishing that the story would somehow change and that she didn't have to meet her fates like in all the others. But for the good we got in these characters, we did lose out a bit on Gilgamesh, Kirei, Lancer, and Archer, who I find to all be interesting characters. But I'm not too bothered, as they weren't really relevant to this story. Stay Night is Saber and Shiro's story. Their love and everything else is just a backdrop for them. Now, to answer the question, is Fate Stay Night really that bad? The best way to look at Fate Stay Night, in my opinion, is basically take everything you know about the main timeline in Fate and just throw it out the window. Yes, while it has Fate slapped on it, this entry is not the same identity that the series has today. For the casual fan, they probably know the Fate series from either Unlimited Blades Work, Fate Go, or just fan art of Saber. The franchise, I feel, has long since abandoned its roots, which I don't think was a bad thing. The series decided to pivot, and man did it pay off, because this franchise now just prints money. But this entry into the series is a nice little bookmark in the franchise's history. Now, would I tell someone to never watch it? Well, I certainly want to tell them to start with it, but if they enjoy Fate and have watched everything else, I would say it's a fun watch. Just turn off your brain in the sense of looking at it through the same lens as all the other main timeline stuff. So, yeah, Fate Stay Night it's alright. It has its moments where it's good, and then it has its moments where it's bad. But overall, I think it's a good experience just to watch. Okay, now an explanation why it's been so long since I've uploaded. Well, life has been lifing. I currently got another job, so I'm working 2 jobs, one full-time, one part-time. Also going to school, and just doing a lot of other stuff for voiceover and voice acting. So, I haven't had much time to focus on this. But now finally being a quote-unquote responsible adult, I've figured out my timing throughout the day where I can work on stuff for YouTube, working on the scripts at work whenever there's downtime, and then as well being able to do this voice acting and voiceover whenever I have in-between gaps whenever I don't have to work on client work. And then the usual thorn in my side is editing. I need to hire an editor if I can. Because don't get me wrong, editing is not the worst thing in the world. It's just really hard for me to sit down half the time and just edit. There's no way around it. So, yeah, that's that. And more stuff to come, because I've been writing like a madman. I've been Alexander Hamilton. He wrote the other 81! I think that's the line. I forget. I'm not a theater kid yet, because I'm taking acting school. But anyways, thank you ladies and gentlemen for boarding this edition of the Messy Express. I've been your conductor Brandon. We've arrived at our final destination, so please don't forget your belongings as you disembark. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you can stay up to date on the next time this train leaves the station, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye!